Hey guys, it's Betty from BakerBetty.com, and today I am going to walk you through the process of making a fluffy white sandwich bread. Now this is the kind of bread that is super soft and tender and perfect for things like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or a grilled cheese sandwich, or it even makes really great French toast. Now as always, you can find the full printable recipe on my website linked in the description, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start by combining warm water with warm milk, both at 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, it's really important that your liquid is not too hot, so if you don't have a thermometer, err on the side of it being a little too cool so you don't kill the yeast. It should feel just barely warm. Next, you want to add one 7-gram package of either active dry or rapid rise yeast. And then I'm going to add a large pinch of sugar and whisk all of that together to dissolve the yeast and wake it up. Now this is called proofing the yeast, and it is going to ensure that our yeast is alive and give it a little jump start before we move on with the recipe. Now we're going to let that mixture sit for about 10 minutes, and you should see small bubbles forming on top. Now I've sped the video up here so you can see how the bubbles are popping up and it looks a bit foamy. If you don't see any of this activity at all, then your yeast might be too old and you need to start over with new yeast. Next, I'm going to add the rest of the sugar to the bowl along with some really soft butter, salt, and then the bread flour. Now you can use either bread flour or unbleached all-purpose flour here. Either will work fine, but bread flour is going to give your sandwich bread a little more structure and chew. Now stir all of that together until it is combined. And I actually switched over to using my hands because it works a little better to really combine the ingredients and make sure all of that flour is absorbed. It's going to look very shaggy and sticky at this point. Okay, now flour a clean work surface and turn your dough out onto it. And then flour the top of the dough, and we're going to start kneading it by hand. Fold the dough in half and push it away from you using the heels of your hands to stretch it out. Now turn it 90 degrees and fold it in half again and push it away from you. Do this over and over again. Now what we are doing here is working the gluten structure to build strength in our dough. This gluten structure is what is going to hold in the gases that the yeast creates as our dough rises. You can use a bit more flour as needed so it doesn't glue itself to the countertop or to your hands, but you want the dough to stay sticky, so use as little flour as possible. It's going to take about 8 to 10 minutes of kneading, and you will know your dough is ready when it is smooth and elastic, and when you round it up into a ball, it's going to stand up nice and tall. You can also press in on it with your fingers, and if it bounces right back up, that is a good sign that you have built a nice gluten structure. Now I'm transferring the dough to a lightly greased bowl and turning to coat it, and I'm covering it with plastic wrap to let it rise until it is about double in size. Now this should take about 1 hour if you used quick rise yeast or 2 hours if you used active dry yeast. Once the dough has risen, gently press the air out of it and turn it out onto a clean work surface. Divide the dough in 2 equal pieces, and now we're going to shape it. Start with the dough in roughly a rectangular shape and press down on it to make sure all of the gas is out of it. Starting at one of the short edges, pull out on the corners and bring it into the center of the top of the dough and then press to seal. Now fold the top of the dough over to meet the seam that you created and press that to seal. Now do this process again 2 more times of pulling the corners out and bringing them into the seam and then the top down. Now what we are doing here is creating tension on the outside of our dough so that we have a nice rolled shape, and this is going to ensure that our loaf has a really even crumb and that it rises up instead of spreading out. Now you can fold the dough over itself to finish sealing the loaf and roll it under your hands slightly to seal the seam and even out the distribution of the dough. Now place it in a greased loaf pan and gently pat it down to fill the pan. Now just shape the second loaf the same way. A full batch of this recipe does make 2 loaves, but if you look at the written recipe, I have given you the quantities to make a half batch, which will only make 1 loaf if you prefer. Cover the shaped loaves, and now we need to let them rise again, which is also known as proofing. You want them to rise until they are about double in size and the dough is starting to crown the pan. This should take about 1 hour with rapid rise yeast and 2 hours with active dry yeast. Once the dough has proofed, you can brush the tops with a bit of egg wash, which is just an egg whisked with about a tablespoon of water. This is optional, but it's going to give the loaves a really nice brown and shiny look to them. We're going to bake them at 350 degrees Fahrenheit until they are golden brown and baked through. Turn the loaves out onto a cooling rack and let them cool completely before slicing. At the very least, you need to wait an hour. If you slice bread while it is still hot, it's going to stale very quickly. And that is it. Super fluffy sandwich bread with very few ingredients and just a little bit of effort. I hope you enjoyed this recipe, and if you did, go ahead and give it a like. And if you're new here, welcome. I am so happy to have you, and make sure you subscribe for weekly recipe tutorials. Leave me any questions you have down in the comment section. I'm always happy to answer them, and I'll see you guys next time with another recipe tutorial.